for offer of $100,000 bet. So, I believe the standards that we ought to adopt, and that would be in negotiations, would have to be in terms of something students would take with them after the semester, after the year, something that would lead to something else that could make their lives more worth living, make their lives more satisfying, more enjoyable. If you understand the world, and if you understand other human beings, you can derive a lot more satisfaction than if you're somebody like me who was so incurious that I never thought about what a battery was or a pump. I just looked up 875. I just looked up pump on actually I did it on Bing, but you could do it on Google. No, I did it on Wikipedia, and I didn't understand it. Didn't understand battery either. Didn't really understand turbine. But I understood Viagra because my ability to deal with chemical variables and biochemical variables, I can do a little something with that. So what we want, I take it, is something that will push, let's say 8th graders, could be 7, push them out into the world with a project. The project, they would be required to come up with a project. Now, they don't think in those terms. Well, they would have to think in those terms, because that's an assignment. And then they would have an excuse to draw on what their classmates know. And the classmates would then feel free to draw on what they know. And people sometimes know a good bit. If you're dealing with psychology, particularly, this is the perfect subject. Why is it perfect? Because we're humans. We know human stuff that we wouldn't automatically know about batteries or pumps. Unless, it was the heart as a pump. My pump being fucked up. The notion is you use what people understand. I taught some counseling courses, and there were other people teaching psychological counseling at the same school, and my course is filled. Within a couple of hours of registration starting, my course is filled, and the others didn't. And the idea was, this was a laboratory. I mean, Yalom, the group therapist, the theoretician, put out a textbook that was 600 pages. What kind of idiot would put out a 600-page textbook citing studies? I mean, that's the least edifying form that knowledge could be communicated in. So we didn't use a textbook. This is a laboratory, so we're just going to let students devise ways of coming to understand their species. In the case of individual counseling, I just said, if you'd like to talk about something going on in your life, we'll have somebody as the counselor, and you'll be the counsel aide. You don't have to do it. Nobody has to do it. But if you want to do it, it has to be authentic. Because inauthentic stories, made-up stories, are transparently not real human behavior. It's kind of like if you see somebody. I remember seeing the old man George Bush, who was president in the late 80s. I saw him playing catch on TV. It was a TV op, and he was throwing a baseball around somebody. But you could see this man had thrown a baseball before. I mean, you could see by the easy motion and anticipating where the ball's coming and the moving of his glove hand. You could see this guy was doing it, could do it in his sleep. That is, it was a procedural learning that was part of him. And that's the way it is with human behavior. And that's why if one is careful, you can detect lying. Because inauthentic stories, once you become accustomed to looking at them properly, can be detected. Now, so let's take, how much time?
No, 7, 8 minutes.
Okay, so let me just give you something here. This is from an article I had published in a journal called Education 10 years ago. And it's in part about psychological capital. And I took two historical figures, Thomas Jefferson and John Marshall. Jefferson is kind of legendary. Jefferson has been a good source of revenue for biographers and for publishers. And Jefferson, was aware that everything he did, he recorded so people could know what a great man he was. Although on closer examination, it's very, very difficult to find anything that he actually did that made any difference. That's not true of Marshall. Marshall is not somebody who the typical junior high, middle school, high school student would know the name of. But his influence on American history was much more dramatic than Jefferson. This was a man who knew how to get things done. And he was a risk taker. Now, let's look at the psychological capital these two people brought to bear. Marshall, I'm getting this from biographers. I don't know anything except what I've read. And anything about Jefferson, there's a very good chance it's a lie. Stuff about Marshall is a very good chance it was dolled up. After all, if you're going to write about somebody, you're probably going to make them a little bit more attractive than they actually were. Marshall liked to hang out at taverns and drink with friends, and he liked to talk politics. He also got up at 3 in the morning and walked 6 miles to feel good. So here's a little sign of a modern man there. He fought in the American Revolution. He was 19, but his father was the commander of his unit, and so he got a commission. And he was with Washington at Valley Forge. Evidently, the stories about Valley Forge are lies, but nevertheless, you know, he fought. You know, he fought. He was in the thick of whatever was going on. So he had to be somebody who could take the stress. He didn't have to serve. He was sociable, fun-loving, high in verbal reasoning. He eventually became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and so he wrote maybe 100 opinions or more. So you can look and see if you like his reasoning. But it's there. He didn't save his personal papers. So evidently he didn't think he was a great man, or didn't really care. He seemed to be able to win the political support of people whose ideas were different from his, because they liked him. So here's a guy that you know, could get people to like him. He was also the high jump champion of the American Revolutionary Forces, and also the fastest runner. So he was a vigorous person. Jefferson was depression prone, anxiety prone. He was fearful of public speaking. He mumbled and talked softly and only gave very, very short speeches. Apparently, being around people where there was conflict was very hard on him. He was anxiety prone, nervous, and if people were arguing, this would upset him terribly. So he would never be around people unless he had picked them out and they would agree. So he would meet with people of one political stripe in one dinner meeting and another political stripe in another meeting. Okay, we'll go on. What's next? This is the last one coming up.
Okay.